Hello and welcome to another episode of the original Intersex Connect Live, the place where people in and affecting the intersex community come together. I'm your host, Joseph Benedict, and in today's episode, we'll be talking to Ela Xora. Ela is an artist, an art historian, and today we will be talking about intersex gods, the Roman Empire, as well as intersex in religious history. This is an interactive broadcast, so we will be able to respond to your comments and questions real time. Well, hey, everybody, it's awesome. I love that new music that we got from bensound.com, Ben sound.com. I still love that music. Anyway, let's see. It's Pride here in Las Vegas, so been kind of busy. Did the parade yesterday, got the festival today. But one thing I wanted to mention is we've been doing this for a year now, and I wanted to thank anybody and everybody that's had something to do with it. I was going to make a list of names of everybody, but I'm definitely afraid that I would leave somebody out, and I don't want anybody to feel less than. So I thank the people watching, the people producing, the people participating and being in the interviews. I thank you so much because we couldn't have done it without you. And anyway, thank you so much for letting us go for an entire year. I never thought that was going to happen, to be honest. But anyway, so today we are going to bring in our beautiful guest co-host. There we go. Our beautiful co-host, Julie Mayfield. Julie, come on in.
Hi.
Julie. How are you?
I'm good. It is, we are right in the middle of fall, starting off a beautiful fall for everybody, but it is so busy. I have so many things going on. I know you have a lot going on as well. And just excited to be a part of this show and have this platform to be able to talk to people around the globe about being intersex and having an intersex life and all the great things that come with that. But gosh, I can't catch my breath. I have so many things going on.
Better than being bored, right?
I guess, but
a little bit.
We have a lot. So we have this show today, right? Because it's Intersex Awareness Month. And then on our Intersex Day of Awareness and Remembrance, which is October 26th, we have an awesome guest joining us, Kimberly Zieselman. And she herself is a mother and an advocate and an author. She wrote the book XOXY. We're going to talk about that.
I have it right there.
I've started to read that and get some. So we just have a lot going on. And then just to remind people, we've talked about maybe taking a break through the holidays because we know a lot of people are busy and we're trying to, kind of revamp this show as well. So I think we will take that break, but I think we're going to try and find some programming that we can supplement in our absence, right? So
see what happens. It's all up to the universe at this point.
It is up to the universe. Well, so, and I've got 2 weddings to go to this fall. Like if I didn't have enough stuff to do already, I have to portray Olivia Newton-John as Bad Sandy at a wedding in October. And then I have my brother's little wedding or my little brother's wedding in November. So we all have a lot going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, hey, about today's guest, I expect to be educated because this is one of those subjects where once I started looking into it, it was like, oh my gosh, this is expensive and I don't know anything at all. So today, I think I'm going to learn more than anybody, or I hope everybody learns something. But I think it's going to be a very, very educational show talking about intersex through the history and seeing how we got to where we are.
It is very interesting. I've known Ela for about a year and a half now. She has always been a huge advocate on the other side of the pond for all things trans and intersex. And a lot of people recognize her as being masked. So she has, throughout her advocacy, has always kind of worn a mask. We can even ask her about that and what that means for her. But she has been, I would say, globally, a huge feather in our cap as a community, just in the way that she's been able to really reach mainstream and educate and advocate. I believe she's in Spain currently, living on her family ranch, if you will, and she raises horses and she's an artist. But I mean, really, the information she's going to provide us today is really, I think, going to blow a lot of people just out of the water, per se. You know, it's information that's definitely out there, but we called it Unmasking Intersex History because she is absolutely doing that, but she is also showing through her history and her research that we have been here for centuries.
Since the beginning of humanity.
And that makes me feel, even as an advocate, that we do belong. We are meant to be here, right? And we're going to talk about that. So without much more ado, let's go ahead and honor her by inviting her into this chat today. Everybody watching at home and joining us in the chat, please welcome Ela Xora.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Ela. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. What time is it there?
Here in Spain, it's 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock p.m. That just tells you where we are worldwide with time. Thank you so much for joining us. We've had to have guests on the show before that are here at like 2 o'clock in the morning their time.
Yeah, I imagine.
It's crazy. So thankfully, you're able to join us at a decent time. We have you as an artist and art historian, and you're going to provide us with a lot of information tonight. But we're going to start off by asking you a question that we ask all of our guests. Are you intersex?
I'm not intersex. I thought I was intersex. I had conversations with a particular doctor that I was paying privately to do a test that I wanted to have done. And he said, it's possible that you are intersex. So for a couple of years, I did live thinking I was intersex, you know, over like 12 years ago. And then that result came back negative, that I did have XY chromosomes. So I thought, okay, because I thought maybe I had XY chromosomes. When I was sort of, you know, ignorant about the subject, I didn't really know anything about it. I met someone at a party who was quite similar to me. And they said to me, you know, that they had always felt like a girl trapped in a boy's body, and then they found out later they had XXY chromosomes. Obviously, now I know that not everyone with XXY chromosomes feels like that. There are, you know, men who are men, and they don't feel at all intersex. They don't even want to, as we know, label themselves in that with that name. But this particular intersex person did want to be known as intersex. It was something that they just discovered recently, and I met them on at a boat party. And that's the first time that I ever met an intersex person. So they made me think, okay, maybe that's what must be with me. You know, that's what's happened with me. And maybe I've got chromosomes that are XXY. So I had that test, and it didn't come back that I've got XY chromosomes. And then after that, I sort of started thinking, well, maybe I am still intersex, because there's a spectrum of other possibilities, you know, and also I haven't had any internal scans inside, so I don't know if I have any female organs inside. I've got friends who, like me, later on at 50, 60 years old, had a scan inside and found that they had rudimentary womb, or, you know, even full female anatomy inside, like one of my friends, Abby, who's died recently. So anyway, at the moment I identify as transgender, but I'm going to be having tests, and I do have some symptoms which I've spoken to another doctor about, and they said, well, it could be that you've got this particular intersex biology. So anyway, I think that's a long road of discovery that I'm going to be going down later. But now, yeah, I'm just, I identify as trans, and I'm a really big intersex ally, because, you know, what's happening to intersex people is absolutely disgusting, particularly as I've been going through ancient history with the projects that I'm doing, and I'm constantly looking for inspirations for artworks, for paintings, audio works, video works, and this subject obviously is really fascinating to me, particularly because there's so much history out there that is so concealed and deliberately masked by institutions, and has been for thousands of years.
We're going to talk to you about that a little bit more in just a few minutes, and we're going to get into that. So you're not intersex, but you do identify as trans, and we're glad to have you. And then just to get us started, and you were about to walk into that conversation anyway, are we currently the only representation of intersex or intersex community? Is this a new fad?
No, not at all. If you look through the most important civilizations in history that have been influential to our own culture, but also other cultures like Rome, like the Roman Empire, and the Greek empires. So Eastern territories like Egypt, Mesopotamia, there's lots. Also, even somewhere like Anatolia in modern-day Turkey became an important hub for an intersex goddess that was imported into Rome. So no, the answer is it's definitely, intersex people and intersex identities, intersex bodies, women who are intersex, men who are intersex, non-binary people who are intersex in the intersection. They're not a new fad at all. You guys aren't a new fad. But what this is a literal institutionalized cover-up of epic proportions for lots of different reasons, unfortunately, mainly because we've inherited this structure. And for a lot of people, they didn't even realize this was going on. So this has been a revelation for lots of people. But obviously, as a result of that, people have either, in these institutions, particularly museums, they've either realized what's going on and decided to commission projects to start unmasking the history of intersex people and also trans people, because they're very linked, particularly in the Roman Empire. Different things were happening to these two different, huge sections of society that are, okay, minor overall to the, huge population around us, but there's such a spectrum within the intersex community, and there's such a spectrum within the trans community. Do you know what I mean? Yes. So there's lots of different things that were happening to people in the ancient world that I've been sort of discovering. And really, the way I came to all of this was the word hermaphrodite and the god hermaphrodite, this deity that was actually quite important in Rome.
All right, can we hold off on? Can I interrupt you there? Because
yes.
Before you go there, I got a couple of things that I want.
Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
That's okay. That's why I'm here, to interrupt. Oh,
cool. Well, you're doing it very well.
Thank you so much. But last show we had Ronnie on from Zimbabwe.
Yes,
and
Ronnie.
Had I talked to you before I talked to Ronnie, I might have learned about the Maori god. I know of the Maori people and their succession from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe, but I did not know about the god Maori. And because it's so linked to the last show, I was wondering if we could start with that.
Yes, I don't know if there's any link there, but there's possibly, you've just explained some history there. It would make sense if they were brought to Rhodesia. Really fascinating god. I don't know really that much about them, but I have discovered them recently, and in a way through Ronnie and my friendship that's been burgeoning with Ronnie and what they've been telling me about what's been happening to intersex children in Zimbabwe. And let's not forget that Zimbabwe is a post-colonist country that unfortunately has suffered really, really brutal treatment from the British Empire that went over there. Actually, quite recently, if you look in history, it wasn't that long ago. And they
liberated themselves, I believe, in the late 80s, early 90s of 1990. So, yeah, not long ago.
Well, and I think just before the Second World War as well. I've got to look at the dates. But anyway, I do know that, that it's been basically the British went over there, colonized, and obviously, as they always do, all colonial countries, then impressed its religious status onto the country. And so I'm not sure how you pronounce that particular god, if it is Maori, or I think someone like Ronnie would be the best person to advise us on that. But basically, that god was erased, completely erased. And they were intersex. They were seen as being intersex. And what I want to get across, actually, with the discovery of intersex gods, particularly in Africa, is that the societies that existed around these religious structures, if they had intersex gods in their structures, more often than not, it meant that intersex people were then very, very well respected in that society because they were being linked to those gods. And if they had a high status in that society, those gods, then that reflected onto the human beings. Now, what's fascinating about that is that that's not only the case in African countries where then those intersex gods have been erased like Maori, but also in Europe this has happened, where, for example, Hermaphrodite, the god Hermaphrodite, was then erased by Christianity, which was then, imposed onto Zimbabwe and lots of other countries around the world. So it's like a kind of domino effect of colonization. And I like the idea of looking at the roots of that colonization. Like, where did that start? Where did the erasure of intersex gods start? Because the thing is, there are loads of intersex gods around the world. In Eastern territories, there were absolutely loads. And there's a series of, like, a kind of a succession, a continuum of different intersex mother goddesses, particularly, that were depictions of intersex mother nature. That's how they saw some of them. And particularly a goddess in Rome called Cybele. She was seen as a goddess of mother nature and other things as well. And then her roots were in Anatolia in Turkey. So these intersex gods did come into more Western countries that became colonizing epicenters of power, like the Roman Empire, and then the cultures that evolved from the Roman Empire, like, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, all these different European empires. The whole thing is just so fascinating. I can't stop looking at it because it's full of different pieces of history that none of us were taught at school, and yet, I think this is really important conversations to have, because in the modern day, we're told that intersex bodies and intersex identities and intersex men, intersex women, non-binary intersex people in the middle, you guys don't exist. Apparently, you're a new dangerous fashion.
Right.
So to look at these really important, really influential, famous ancient civilizations, and to see that actually in Egypt, in Greece, in Rome, in Mesopotamia, in ancient Turkey, in India, in all these different regions, particularly the Eastern countries, they did have intersex gods. But obviously, as we know, not just them. In the Americas, if you go throughout the Americas, loads of different areas. Mexico, ancient Mexico, they had a god system that included intersex gods. The Northern American, Native Americans, they also had, as we all know, they had intersex identities in religion. And they also, and again, it's the same scenario where the colonizing countries went over to those countries, erased the religious systems, and then put in the binary Christian, stamp on, which was developed in the Roman Empire anyway, in as a hybrid between the Roman ideologies and the Eastern ideologies that had come in by Christianity, and that Rome had created this new religion around called Roman Catholicism, which is a very specific religion. So you can see that in ancient cultures that are native in Americas, Africa, loads of different countries around the world, Australasia, the religious systems did include very often, and it's just so fascinating to think that all around the world there were actually different intersex gods, and as a result of that, there are also documented evidence of intersex people as part of these religions. Sometimes they were, often, always actually, when there was intersex gods, there's clergies that then have intersex names as well. Like, for example, the word hermaphrodite is a composite word between Hermes, Aphrodite, the child that was born between them, and it's like, the masculine and feminine together as one. There's always been words in antiquity to describe a spectrum of different intersex people. particularly the ones that were intersex and non-binary at the same time, actually. Although
We're
in
not
Rome,
just, excuse me, we're not just talking words, right? I mean, they were absolutely depicted in artwork on the sides of buildings, in relief, in
yeah,
sculptures. I mean, they're out there being
They're in the
celebrated
Bible.
and recognized.
yes, exactly. I mean, I like art history. That's what I specialize in, particularly with the kind of trans and intersex art history that everyone is just kind of, you know, left in the gutter. So from my point of view, I do like studying the statues, the literature, the you know, sculpture reliefs. There's so many different artworks actually where trans and intersex gods and people are actually documented, even in coins. And you know, like we forget things like this, but like Cybele, an intersex goddess who was never really worshipped as intersex in Rome because her mythologies that had been imported with her into Rome said that she had been genitally mutilated of her intersex genitals, and that she was only kind of female down below and completely had sort of been erased of her intersex androgyny that was so powerful and so
Imagine that.
like so threatening is the word to the male and female gods. I mean, in the myths that were imported into Greece and Rome of Cybele, who was called Agdistis originally in ancient Turkey.
Now, she even from Cybele wasn't, and I think we've talked about this before on Rose All Day, but wasn't there a Cybelean sect? Wasn't there a whole community that kind of came out
there's a
of
religion.
Cybele?
Yeah. So there's an intersex. There was a, yes, that's right. There's a religion that is the Cybele religion, Cybelean religion. Like I said, originally called Agdistis, but then the Romans imported in Cybele and her clergy called the Galli into Rome in 204 BC during the Carthage Wars because Rome was in real trouble against Hannibal. And so effectively they imported her in with a black rock that symbolized her. And they also imported in hermaphrodite statues as her sort of companion, and also Attis statues, who was the her son, but in other myths it's her lover. So there's a real kind of evolution to these mythologies anyway, you know, a bit like Christianity in the way it's evolved into all these different forms of Christianity. You know, there's like loads different churches that have
So
evolved.
I want to ask you real quick. Is there places people can go and see these statues out in a public museum or something like that, or are they still hidden behind in the basement at the museum?
Well, yes, there are museums that do exhibit some of them, but I do believe that there are also lots of museums that have lots of these intersex statues in basements, in store cupboards, locked away, but also other museums, like for example, the British Museum had a statue of a hermaphrodite god, and an artist did a sketch of that particular statue, and the British Museum have still got that sketch, I believe. And then that statue was taken off by a curator, and they were genitally mutilated and turned into a sleeping Venus statue.
So the actual statue, they went in and removed the offending genitalia and then brought it back out onto the museum floor as a sleeping.
You got it in one, honey.
Oh,
so
that's
you got it in one,
absurd.
sister. So basically, these crazy, you know, the whole society is crazy. But anyway, these people were just going along with the society, and this is the problem. They had this intersex statue genitally mutilated. The Liverpool Museums has got this statue now in England. It is structurally unsound now because of the damage that they did to it. They removed children around the breasts of the statue that were suckling from the breasts. And then they also had the genitals removed down below. Now, what's interesting about that particular story, that they moved the children feeding around the breast, it goes to show that actually in antiquity, these intersex statues were seen as the kind of the epicenter of life, as in kind of they were seen as protectors and epicenters of birth of life, because
Male
they
and
were
female. Yeah.
they were all together as a pantheon. So Hermaphrodite went over with Cybele, and Cybele was, Mother Nature, protector goddess of Mother Nature. She became arguably the greatest mother goddess of the Roman Empire. She was the mother of the Romans for 500 years. And, she's one of these goddesses that I didn't know anything about Cybele. I'd never even heard the name Cybele until I started looking into her. And I only started to look into her because of this word hermaphrodite, which is an antique word for an intersex person, but also is used in some occasions to also describe a transgender woman, because the transition of hermaphroditus to the outside viewer in the Roman period could be quite similar to hermaphrodite in that, handsome man who suddenly, left all that behind and suddenly turned into a woman that's not quite the full stereotypical woman that you would think, and is, sort of an androgynous woman. The Romans, I think, really came up with all these mad ideologies about why these transitions were happening, which are very public in Rome. This is what drives me fucking insane about the media today. Everyone keeps talking about, sort of transitions as if they're new, dangerous things. People have been transitioning or feminizing or masculinizing throughout the course of human history, and it's been documented, particularly in part of these religious organizations. So it's certainly not new when, religions in Rome, in one of the most important empires in the whole of human history, which is the epicenter of the colonizing fucking world, had transitioning gods and people. And, someone like, for example, in Greece, in ancient Greece, the Dr. Hippocrates, who's very important, very influential, he actually spoke publicly about why he thought men assigned males were transitioning to the female end of the spectrum and were becoming more feminine and becoming female, and vice versa. And he came up with this idea, the ideology that, and I'm sure he came up with it because of the society around him. And, this is all part of a kind of mass psychology here, he said that, for example, men who became trans women were cowards in a former life, or loads of other different things. So it was always very superstitious based. Total bullshit is the technical term. And effectively, they were constantly sort of trying to find reasons, good reasons, as to why some of the assigned males in their society were presenting themselves as young adults and as, older people. Sometimes these transitioning stories were happening very old, in very late life, because obviously the people were sort of scared that they didn't want to transition, in front of everyone or whatever. There's, like, for example, documented evidence of a slave who was already quite, mature. They were certainly not a spring chicken. They were captured and killed because they tried to join the religion of Cybele and become one of the priestesses of Cybele that transitioned from the category of assigned male to then dressing, living as a woman, and having a sex change down below. And that sex change actually was seen as a religious gateway towards being able to see the future and being a prophet. Now,
So they were actually lifting these within the Sibylian sect. They were lifting them up to be almost like soothsayers and prophets and
fortune tellers.
fortune tellers, right?
Yeah.
Advisors is the word I like.
And that they were kept kind of, from what I've read and researched, they were kept out of public view in
Rome. Yes, they were banned from public view. Now, I genuinely think that it wasn't just trans women that were entering this particular religion. I think also there were intersex women who were entering the religion, like you, Julie, and even you, Jess, because the thing is that if you can understand how violent that society was, to have a religion that had a gorgeous temple where you were being wined and dined upon inside because you were seen as a prophet, and you were given freedom inside. Okay, it was like a gilded cage, but it's better than being in a gilded cage than outside where you're getting beaten up and treated like shit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I really think that a lot of trans women and intersex women who survived the cull of intersex children at birth, because there was
and when we say the call of intersex children at birth, we talk today a lot about how even in places like America, there's still fear-mongering parents into getting rid of their intersex individual kids and aborting them. What are we talking about on some level when we say culling? If they made it past that cull, as you said, what was happening to us back then? Is it similar?
Well, can you talk about the water babies? I think you know something about the water babies, don't you, Ella?
Yeah. So basically, this is what was happening. During the Second Carthage War period, when Sibylle and Hermaphrodite were imported into the Roman Empire, so this is two deities that are very linked to trans and intersex everything, because they've got clergies around them that are trans intersex. They've got bodies themselves that are trans intersex. One of them forcibly modified, the other one in its evolved state, but that is sort of seen as a joke by some people in Rome and like a prophet figure by others. When they were brought in, these two particular gods, in 204 BC, the Roman Senate had already been issuing a cull, basically, statement across the empire that if they discovered any intersex child born, they were being seen as bad omens. They was being seen as the birth of an intersex child was seen as something that was going to happen in the empire, like a portent is what they call it, a portent. So some writers say that it was like something good was going to happen or something bad was going to happen. Okay, so there was split between whether these hermaphrodite figures and suddenly these emerging hermaphrodite children that were being born into their society, but had really been born all the way through, but people had probably been killing them off actually before that because they were scared of the repercussions of what was going to. So to them, because Rome was very binary in its it was very violent, and all the people were being pushed to one end of the spectrum or another end of the spectrum. So anyway, they issued this kind of obsessive witch hunt quest to find intersex children in the Roman Empire. When the fuck has anyone at school told us that there was a witch hunt for intersex children in the Roman Empire?
I never heard it. Did you?
Which academian worth their salt has stood up in public and said that intersex children who are still being abused today, and human rights charities around the world have said this is torture of these children and murder is infanticide? Why don't any of the academians stand up, for fuck's sake, and say that in the ancient world, in the Roman Empire, children were being hunted down? And let me just read something to you so you can understand the magnitude of this, because this is really fucking huge. this changes everything. This is game-changing information, because intersex people are not just a common visual in religious antiquity. They're also very famous because of this witch hunt. And let me explain to you now what someone like Livy, who's a really famous writer in Rome, what he said about what was happening in Rome well, to give you an idea, Livy was born in 60 BC. Okay, so if you imagine hermaphrodite and Cybele were imported in 204 BC. So that's like slightly under 200 years that those two gods have been in the Roman Empire. The Battle of Carthage Wars, Rome wins, eventually after the Third War. And then they attribute the success of the Carthage empires to Cybele, particularly. So suddenly, intersex gods in the Roman Empire have gone from 0 to hero.
The highest point on the mountain, right?
To hero. So then Rome was tied to something and to individuals, to genders and sexes that they didn't want to admit were part of nature and the god systems that they had anyway in the East, which they were always fighting against. I think this is partly why they really started to develop hatreds towards these intersex gods that had been brought in from the East, because they were always at war with these sort of territories. And Romans were very racist. They wanted to develop their own identity. They didn't want it to be dependent upon Eastern territories, which they saw as having sort of more feminine men, more feminine religious structures. It wasn't part of their militaristic campaign that they had in mind, or their medical and religious regime that was being pushed forward a lot by the huge amounts of the emperors and the patriarchy that was in legal control of Rome. So Livy, 200 years later, after Cybele had been imported in and been accepted and been considered, the protector of Rome, and that's why Rome had won these Carthage wars, intersex children were still being killed. They were still being hunted down. Now, let me explain what Livy said here. So he wrote this. It's called Ab Urba Condita, and I'll give you the source number. It's XXX1.12, and he said
XXX1. I mean, I know we're not talking about intersex, but XXX. I mean,
it's fate. Let's not even go.
That.
I didn't even realize. I hadn't even seen this. Okay, but you're right. So anyway, this is what Livy says. So this is big shit. Furthermore, the fact that numerous bad omens were reported in many places at that time period encouraged the Romans to expatiate the violation of the temple of a temple in Locri. For in Lusania, some of these names I might get wrong, please don't sue me, okay? For in Lusania, they say that the sky burned red. At Privernum, the sun was red throughout the entire day, even though the sky was clear. You can see they're fucking obsessed with, like, even if you look at like the weather, oh, that sun over there, it's just moved from there to there, and that means that I must go over there and sacrifice a bull and then a pig and then put it on my head and then run around like a fucking idiot. Do you know what I mean? This is like, this is what we've been born from.
Or she says there was an intersex child born in our community and we need to go kill it because we had a red sun.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like, I mean, and it sounds like kind of in some of these works, they're saying we had some supporters, but we also had the naysayers that were saying, get rid of them because they're going to bring the community downfall and misery and crops are going to die. So, I mean, they certainly had us in this kind of limbo of.
Yeah, because they'd established what they thought was Roman, which was, all the spectrum of the males have to go in one direction, which is the most masculine end, and become the warriors. All the females need to go into the other direction, which is the subordinate female wives and slaves, and then the ones that are in the middle and born there but can't really move to either direction because that's not what they are, and there's a huge spectrum between. Well, they are just imploding our whole fucking regime here,
So we should get rid of them.
which
Well,
is
yeah.
foreign anyway, and we don't really, it's not really Roman. And also all these children have started to come in as a result of these intersex gods being brought into our religious domain. Do you know what I mean? So let me continue, because we haven't even got to the good bit yet. It's not good, it's awful, but it's proof. Do you know what I mean? This is real scientific, anthropological proof, historic proof, yeah. So the sun was red throughout the entire day, even though the sky was clear. At the temple of Suno Sospita in Lanovium, a giant crash was reported. Furthermore, unusual births were announced in many places. Okay. Among the Sabines, a child of uncertain sex was born, and another person of ambiguous sex was found at the age of 16. Okay, 16 years old, they found this intersex child being sheltered by their parents, and they were snatched from them. Okay. At Frusino, a lamb was born with a pig's head. Is that even fucking possible? These guys were probably just smoking weed all day, and they were just like, see, I have no fucking idea. I mean, I have no idea what's going on. A lamb born with a pig's head? The problem is they were drinking too much wine as well.
Or they were licking frogs.
They were all fucked. At Frusino, a lamb was born with a pig's head. Yeah, right, bitch. At Sinuse, I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, sorry, I'll have to do a bit more research on this bit. A pig was born with a human head. They're completely off their tits at this point, clearly. Born with a human head. And on public land at Lusania, a colt was born with 5 feet. Well, I mean, sometimes there are more of these. But you can see they were very much pinning the intersex births with the births of animals as well, that they saw as unusual. And so they were very much publicly saying, these aren't Roman children. These aren't human Roman children. This is something which is coming from outside the Roman Empire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've read somewhere that a lot of these places weren't even in the Roman Empire. Livy was sort of saying, look, they're on the parameter of the Roman Empire. It's coming in. It's like they didn't want to admit that Romans themselves had intersex children. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they were
something that was foreign.
A different type and foreign type that were invading essentially their.
Yeah, and because of the time frame and the era, they didn't have science, really develop science like we do now. So they couldn't really see what was going on behind the mask of the life. They couldn't tell that actually these children were actually quite frequently born. And this is what they're sort of saying here on this next part. This is what they say. Okay, this is what Livy continues saying. These unhealthy omens. So, in Livy's opinion, this was bad. The Rome's changing. It's starting to affect the children that are being born into our communities. These unhealthy omens and misshapen births seem to show nature straying into different paths. Of all these omens, the ill-omened intersex children were immediately ordered to be dragged out to sea, as similar children had been treated during the consulship of Claudius and Livius. So,
dragging them out to sea.
Those are water babies. They put them in a basket and put them out in the ocean and send them away.
Livy also documents, and other people document what was happening to these children. So they were being snatched from their parents, often their mothers. If it was their mother, often, the parents are being treated like shit as well, because it was like the parents had given birth to a child.
And they must have done something wrong in order to give birth.
And I can imagine they would have tortured and probably killed the parents as well, to be quite honest with you. So they effectively, were, okay, so the whole intersex children thing was being left to the auspices which were Etruscan originally in origin, and it was like a kind of a religious sect, quite a minor religious sect that was more concentrated on analyzing the liver of animals to sort of discover things about them, and they were kind of like more animal orientated kind of witchcraft type people, you know what I mean? So they were the ones that were actually in charge of killing these fucking children that were innocent. And on top of that, they were next to them accompanied by priestesses of of Ceres. And so there was female priestesses holding these religious ceremonies, singing hymns, while children were being grabbed, shoved into wooden boxes, shut into the wooden boxes. But before this happened, they would have been shouted at, probably, you know, violently attacked. Cursed.
I mean, very draconian in nature, and also just
very psychologically insane.
Early witch type stuff that we read about in our Salem histories, and I mean, they really did treat us as
it's a witch hunt, like I said. So effectively, they were putting the children into the boxes and they were floating them out to sea in religious ceremonies, where the priestesses were then singing hymns dedicated to Thetis. I think Sibylle also made an appearance in these hymns.
I mean, in essence, really, are we talking about they felt like they were sending us back to where we came from?
Well, this is what's really interesting. Yes, in a way, they saw they saw these intersex gods that had been brought into the Roman Empire as being linked to water, foreign waters, and often they saw that water had affected their intersex status, that it made them sort of intersex, or it feminized them.
They were intersex because of the water.
Yeah. So, like, for example, if you see Hermaphroditus, the story of Hermaphroditus, is that it joined in union with Salmacis in the pool of Salmacis in water, and she's a water nymph. Okay. Now, when I said that originally to some people who were quite well known in academia, they were like, no. And I was like, yes, that's what's happened. They were all linked to water. Water is like on the Romans' brain, thinking that foreign water is what's created what they see as unacceptable and a deviation
because
from.
They viewed foreign water not being like the water in their own kind of area. I would,
I think also it was this
dirty, right? Is that what they're saying?
Well, maybe, but I think it was more than that. I think it's because, the myth of Hermaphroditus is epicentered on water, on foreign waters, in a kind of aquatic area, which is full of lakes. And so there's also, like, for example, there's another ancient author, who documents the large amount of water that they used in the religious ceremonies for these intersex gods. So I think water was, because the religious practices had lots of water in their use, then also the myths surrounded Hermaphrodite with water. There was also a couple of other non-binary trans intersex gods as well that were linked to water that had come into the Roman Empire, like, for example, Atargatis, who's a mermaid goddess who had trans and intersex clergy.
Hey, I like her. She sounds like me.
So anyway, I think water definitely, and it's this foreign waters. Rome, if you look at it, was surrounded by water.
But they still use water. I mean, I'm Christian. I was raised Christian, and they still use water in religion as a cleansing, and
absolutely.
And it's like, right, and you use that holy water to do that. And they use holy water.
It's part of religious rites.
Baptism.
Yes, absolutely. So religion very much orientates around water rites, and certainly in these intersex religions there were water rites. So, you know, like when I described this last part, I read this last part of this documentation that Livy gives us, and he says that these intersex children had been immediately ordered to be dragged out to sea, like the children had been treated during the reigns of Claudius and Livius beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is really fascinating, because I thought that during the Claudian period that intersex people had become more accepted and acceptable, because these statues were being seen more in public during the Claudian period. You've got to remember that Claudius was one of those emperors who had inherited the Roman Empire, or taken on board the mantle of the Roman Empire after the Carthage Wars, after Rome's victory, after Rome's kind of rejoicing in Cibele's protection of the empire. And there's actually a documented piece of evidence of Claudius venerating what I think is an intersex person in Rome, who went from an assigned female category to a male category, and who had become a famous entity in the Roman Empire, in their army. So he'd become a bit of a kind of legend, sort of modern day legend in his lifetime, that he'd been assigned female and then had progressed to male naturally. The account is very sensationalized, as all of these sort of accounts are. But they say that on their wedding day to a man, that a doctor found that their genitals had virilized naturally and that they had become male down below. The truth of the matter is that obviously that wasn't the case. If that had happened, which sometimes can happen to some children that have assigned female but are intersex and have, then in secondary stage puberty, they fully develop their genitals down below. Yep. And they do look like they virilize, and they do virilize. And there's actually, I was reading the other day about different villages around the world that are, or different towns that are very famous for having a relatively large percentage of the girls who are assigned girls who actually aren't girls, who then actually live as men and are the intersex men for all intents and purposes. So I thought during the Claudian period that there might be more of a leeway for these intersex children to be accepted in society and embraced.
Apparently
But
not so much, huh?
according to Livy, no, they were being killed. And then I read another report. I mean,
there's hold on. We're running out of time.
So I'm so sorry.
I'm gonna
It's okay. We can go on.
I think talk about this all night with you guys.
Well, we could go on for hours. First of all, I want to acknowledge the people that are watching the show, like Mariah Johnson, who is here to support Julie, and I'm going to screw this name up, I'm sure, but El Policino, or A Policino, excuse me, and they commented that as a former museum worker, I know things are hidden and locked away. But to actually alter a piece of art history is ridiculous, unethical on so many levels.
Absolutely.
They went on to say that it would make a good media campaign to explore and publicize, especially in this current moment of museums decolonizing and being held more accountable about the provenance and the care of their collections. And that maybe we can find more of these altered statues and make a bigger stink about it. And say,
well, that's a brilliant comment. You both of you just come out with great comments here, and I think that that's exactly where we've got to go with this. Is now using this, limited, fragmented information, piecing it all together, and starting to campaign very publicly for history lessons in schools, incredibly important information, and also for museums to show the public that actually trans and intersex gods and people have existed throughout the course of human history.
Since the beginning of time. Yeah.
So we can't keep ignoring that, and we can't keep saying, no, you're just a dangerous new fad, go away. you lot are just inventing this all, and this is like a kind of new contagion that is spreading. And the thing is, when you look at Rome and you look at our culture now, there are so many different parallels, and it's because our culture is born from Rome. So that's our original chief, if you like, and we've evolved away from that. But this is why this history is really important. And I think together, all of us, we can create something really, really game changing that is so necessary right now, because, this is the moment. We can't wait any longer. And what they're doing is completely immoral and unethical, and it's evil.
Jessup, let's find a big sponsor and we can go around with Ella to all the museums in the world and we'll start pointing out sculptures that were intersex. And
so if anybody wants to sponsor that, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But even if we don't find a sponsor, we can still do it.
True. We still can.
We all go individually to these museums. We start protesting outside and we start doing photographs inside with banners showing people the history of statues that they don't want to explain properly, so they can go.
Yes, we need to take our own photos, because there's so many doctored photos on the internet that if you take one of the photos off the internet and put it up there, somebody's going to actually go take a look at the statue and it's not going to match. So we can't just go grab.
Well, you have to be honest with you in that regard. The Liverpool museums can't be blamed, who have got that particular statue. The Liverpool museums have been actually incredibly honest about the whole scenario, and I only discovered what was going on with that particular statue because of the honesty of Liverpool museums. So I actually think the Liverpool museums need to be applauded for their honesty and their transparency with what's really happened.
So they need to be the example of what to do.
Exactly. But it's the British Museum that needs to pull its finger out of its bumhole and needs to start doing something now.
And I'm sure that's a lot of American museums as well.
Absolutely. All museums. If they're showing collections of Greco-Roman art, they cannot hide the history or the statues surrounding the history related to these gods like Hermaphrodite, Cybele, Atargatis, Phanes. There's loads. I'd be here all night talking to you about names.
That one.
Well, we definitely will have you back in the future, because it is really interesting and we love talking to you. We're going to be heading out soon, but we like to do this thing recently where we ask you just 5 quick questions. Before I do that, Jessup, was there anything that you didn't get answered or that you maybe wanted to ask as we transgress?
I have a lot of research to do. But Ella, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you or know more about what you're doing and your art or anything like that, how would they find out about that?
I think the best way is to follow me on Insta, and it's Xora Insta, and then also just keep up to track with on Twitter as well, Ela Xora on Twitter, and I'm going to be updating those social media channels really soon, putting on loads more videos and starting to do loads more exhibitions about this particular subject, actually. So follow me for the ride.
There you go. 5 random questions.
We're going to ask you 5 random questions. Just give us quick, kind of 1 or 2 word answers, just to get our viewers to know you a little bit better. And let's see, and then they're kind of corny and stupid. What's your favorite cereal or breakfast item?
You know what? My mum bought these chocolate pillows, which are like kind of fluffed up kind of corn, or I don't know what they are. And then they've got like chocolate inside, and they're just so good. They're probably really bad for you, but they were absolutely delicious. I've been really addicted to those for a long time. But I like things like muesli, and things that are healthy generally. But yeah, the chocolate pillows, they got me recently. So
it sounds like we have something here called Crave cereal, and it sounds a lot like that. You breed and raise horses in your spare time. What horse do you not have that you would kill for? Basically, is there a breed or a?
Yeah, well, there's a particular color that I'm obsessed with that I love, which is the Palomino. I really love the palominos that have got like really deep, rich kind of golden chocolate body, and then very white mane and tail. It's kind of a particular sort of colour. And I'm just about to find out next week if one of my mares is pregnant
Oh,
to
cool.
a stallion that produces that colour 100%. So I really hope to God we could get one, because I would absolutely love to have a palomino. But I don't just want the colour. For me, it's about, I like sport horses, so I like horses that are athletic and are have got lovely temperaments, but that are athletic and that are great jumpers, and that move spectacularly. So I'm really into those sort of sport horse types, warm bloods.
Yeah. As an artist, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color is, I would say, I like green, actually. Green, aquamarine, sort of
Aquamarine. That's my favorite. I love aqua.
yeah, that's sort of
green.
between blue and green. Do you know what I mean? I love that.
That's a
That
beautiful
color is it's beautiful, and relaxing.
If money were no object, where would you go to holiday right now?
Where would I go to holiday right now? I would go to somewhere with a really huge beach and loads of really hot men
Ooh, Australia.
and some really great food. And so where is that? Where is that place?
That sounds like Greece to me, or Australia. But
Yeah, the thing is, in Spain, I'm very lucky. There's some really hot men here, and I'm just about to start to trot around and try to find some. So I'm happy just staying in Spain right now. I just want to go to Ibiza or to Mallorca, to be honest with you. So I'm going to be going there soon, and yeah, I think Mallorca now is where I really need to be. Like
Great.
a really
I mean, I'm trying
expensive
to-
hotel in Mallorca with some really hot guys who are there just kind of just at the bar and in the restaurant. I just basically loads of hot guys everywhere. And then, nice friends around me that we can have fun. And
I mean, I'm working on getting my passport updated, so maybe I'll just come to Mallorca and come see you soon.
so let's go to Ibiza and Mallorca. Let's do a double whammy.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll bring Jessup along too. And then the last question in the 5 questions, I guess, would be what song is, or what kind of song, or what song is really your jib right now that like you find you listen to a lot?
Do you know which song I absolutely adore? It's that Sia song, Unbreakable, is it?
Unbreakable by Sia?
Is it Sia, Unbreakable? It's just such a bloody good song. Every time I hear it, it's just so uplifting. But there's just so many brilliant artists that I just, that I really, really am into. I mean, I love Lady Gaga and things like that, obviously, but even people like, I don't know, I love electronica as well, though, to be honest with you, that doesn't have any names behind it, that are just kind of random producers or things that are quite underground.
And then
mix, really.
And then just really quick, because I know a lot of people are interested. I even had somebody that messaged me privately during the show, and they want to know, why the mask? Why do you choose to wear the mask?
Okay, cool. Firstly, I'll just say there is another song actually I love. It's a Spanish song, Despacito. Have you heard it? It's so fucking good. It's so catchy. Anyway, why do I wear a mask? I think, right, well, I'll tell you why. I wear it now because it's a socio-political statement, because trans and intersex people are being masked socially, historically, and our equal human rights are in the gutter right now. So it's kind of like a visual metaphor for that. But also the reason why I started wearing the mask is because when I was about, I think I was like 25, 28, something like that, I had an eye operation in this eye because I'd gone blind in it, and they gave me an operation to try to restore the eyesight. but unfortunately it went totally wrong. I had a cornea transplant, and they didn't realize that actually on the cornea that they gave me, there was Candida. You know, Candida, the bacteria, creates thrush. Obviously, someone hadn't washed their fucking hands. I don't know what. Anyway, they gave me that cornea. They implanted it into my eye. And a couple of days later, my eye just went berserk. The doctor was like, this isn't normal. Oh, God. Blah, blah, blah. I had to have a second cornea transplant. Then the Candida had scarred that second cornea transplant. So now I'm blind in the eye again with a second cornea transplant in my eye. I'm about to go in for a third cornea transplant now. So I really hope this bloody works this time. But that's why I started wearing the mask, because basically for a year to 2 years after, I couldn't wear I couldn't wear makeup on this particular eye. So I'd only been sort of going out publicly as me, dressed as me, for 2 years before that. And I'd really found myself, and I was really depressed before that because I was living a lie, and it was just horrible. So I was suddenly, open the door to me and going out and meeting guys who fancied me as me, and going to clubs and dancing and being honest with my family and being open with them about that, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly the eye operation went wrong. So then I was like, what do I do? I'm not going to wear makeup in one eye. I don't want to go out with makeup just in one eye. It's stupid. Then I thought, okay, I know. Be creative. Start making half masks. And then that way it sort of deflects attention away from the fact that you can't wear makeup on that eye. So that's basically, it was the cornea transplant that went wrong that made me have to get sort of search around for something to sort of distract people away from the fact that my eye didn't have makeup on it.
Well, I've seen you without the mask. I've seen you with it, and you're beautiful in both ways. And
she's just saying that because I paid her. Don't.
And
I take the mask off and it falls apart, babes.
We've enjoyed having you on for our first episode.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We will have you back. Please wait for us in the green room. So as we wrap up this show, we can talk and share more with you as a guest and host. We're going to go ahead and release you to the green room. Thank you again, Ela, and we will see you on a future show. And we're going to go ahead and wrap.
Thanks, Ela. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being a part of the show. I learned a lot.
It's a lot of information. That's a lot to kind of unbox.
Yeah, I have all sorts of notes of stuff to go look up later.
We definitely have to write her back. And just I butchered it too, but she said a museum report card of sorts would accomplish affirming good practices and publicizing bad practices. The Guerrilla Girls and Hackney Flashers had done this successfully. So that's another great comment from the Peanut Gallery here on our show today. For everybody that has watched us today live and continues to watch us in the absence of live podcast on our YouTube channel, we appreciate you. And we're always open to having answers to your questions. If you ever want to ask us something off-site or offline, go ahead and do that so we can tackle that question for you in future episodes.
All right, then. Thanks for listening to the original Intersex Connect Live. To find out more information about any of our guests, the original Intersex Connect Live, to watch prior episodes, leave comments, or connect to us on social media, visit us at linktr.ee/intersexconnect, linktr.ee/intersexconnect. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss future programs, articles, special announcements, events, and even more. If you are interested in volunteering to help create the original Intersex Connect Live, visit our website and send us a message. I'm Jessup Benedict. See you next time on the original Intersex Connect Live.
And I'm Julie. Bye, everybody. We'll see you on the 26th for Kimberly Mascot Zeiselman. See you then.